I wanted a better drip system just like this one, but this thing was going to cost me $1,000 plus probably another $750 to have it shipped from Australia to California, and that just doesn't make financial sense. So I was left to build my own. Come with me as I build this, and I'll share with you all the problems and failures that I incurred along the way. First and foremost, I want to show you a blueprint of how my system was going to be built. I've decided to use a cooler as my sump system. Now, if you're not familiar with a sump, it's basically another container hidden away from your tank to help filter the water. In my system, the cooler will house a water pump that will push water up and into the 3 tanks above. Fresh water then will flow through the tank, pushing dirty water out this hole and back into the sump to filter. I needed my drip system to fit that laminate wall in my garage, so it needed to stay under 6 feet in width, not higher than 5 feet, and not protruding any more out than 1.5 feet. To save money and retain strength, I used 2x2 inch wood to build my frame using screws and wood glue to hold. I had some leftover plywood from a previous project that was used to cover and help hold the structure of the shelf. I then painted the shelves black to hide the wires, which you'll see later. I used 2x sheets of 10x12 feet plexiglass to build my tanks, and cut them myself using a table saw. Remember to use a metal cutting blade. As you'll see here, a wood blade does not have a lot of tooth versus a metal blade has over 100 tooth. If you did use a wood blade, it would damage your plexiglass. You'll basically be just smashing your glass instead of cutting them. So here's my first mistake. My cuts are not accurate.
Let's check out how off this cut is.
During cutting, these plexiglass will heat up and tend to want to shift on you, so you constantly have to put water on it. Through my first error, I recommend paying a little more to have your plexiglass cut by a professional company. They use laser, so it's 100% accurate. The gluing part is easy. You can always do that at home. It's the precise cutting that's very difficult. Anyways, this is what my tanks look like. It's basically a long rectangle tank with dividers. This is the backside. The idea here is that water would drip here, flow throughout these holes, and there are 2 holes in each dividers. And I also left a small gap on the bottom of each dividers to allow water to flow under as well. Then the water will leave through here and back down to the sump. My plan was to stick heaters here to warm the water as the water flows down. Mistake number 2. The water flow was horrible and heat only stayed in this section. Basically, the heat only stayed where the heater was. So this section could be 80 degrees consistently, but it'll be 70 degrees here, 70, and then you get the idea. And because the water flow was so slow, it created a thermocline, which is a horrific nightmare for bettas. I'm only familiar with thermocline because I used to fish a lot. Thermocline mostly occurs in lakes and ponds because the water is still or non-flowing. For example, during a hot summer day, 10 feet from the water surface might be 85 degrees. Then the temperature immediately drops to 60 degrees and doesn't fluctuate much below that. It's only here in this thermocline that the oxygen exists, which means your lake trouts who needs cold water would be about here in the water column, and your basses who needs warm water would be about here because basses don't like freezing cold water. This isn't a fishing show, but can you imagine a fish tank with a thermocline? My bettas were struggling to stay in this upper water column because as soon as they get tired and sinks to the bottom, my bettas became lethargic and ill. Let me be clear, if this garage was better insulated and the entire room was heated, there should be no thermocline in any aquarium. It's only when the room is extremely cold and you're running heaters in aquariums that you experience the same issue I'm having. To resolve this issue, I had to take time to tear down the dividers, then replace them with these paper bar clips and craft mesh. And this resolved the problem. Water now flows consistently and heat distribution is much better. If I needed a section larger, I can just pull one of these sheets out. Behind using a cooler as a sump was to hold heat, but as explained, this was an epic fail. Because by the time the water reaches the tanks, the water had already stabilized to the garage temperature. So that's how I ended up with heaters in the tanks. Mistake or issue number 3. My tanks were not doing a good job holding beneficial bacteria, even though I have a cycled sump system. So I chose to install these small sponge filters, which resolved the problem. Each long tank houses 2 sponge filters as shown here. I think this video has gone long enough, and I know I didn't talk about the LED lighting, which are just cheap Amazon light strips, and then the black hoses that carries waters to my tanks are just plant hoses from Home Depot or Lowe's. And they're about the same size as your aquarium hoses, except they're stiff and more durable than aquarium hoses. Then finally, I use aquarium air valve controllers to control the drips into the tanks. At the end of the day, all Betta drip systems has the same foundation. Water cycles through each tank then into a sump system to filter the water and then back out into the tanks. Well, I wish you the best luck with yours and hope you've enjoyed this video. Here are some of the bettas I store in my Barracks system. Enjoy, and I look forward to seeing you again.